targeting and understanding exactly who you're trying to reach is actually the key. And it's more likely that if you are selling cherries in East Sussex, the East Sussex Times will cover you. It's more relevant, more chances of actually getting the PR than, say, for example, the BBC covering it, because it's not necessarily going to be that interesting. You could tend to spend a lot of time and money reaching those people and then not cover you. The second thing I'll teach you about PR is journalists are lazy. So if you understand this and understand if you provide everything for them, then they don't need to do any work. You're more likely to get the press coverage. So what I always do is I actually write the press release like it's the actual story you want written, with a good headline that makes them happy that they're not selling you, because that's, journalists don't want to write and sell you, they want to write something that's interesting for the reader. So making a good subject line that's good for the reader, making the story good for the reader, I do all the work for the journalist. And then things like photos, I take high resolution photos and I send them with the press clip to make sure they've got everything they need. All they have to do is say yes to the story and then put their own touch on it. Job done. They're human beings. They want to go out for lunch if they can. So if you can make it possible for them to go out for lunch and do their job, then you will win in PR. Too many people are lazy. They send press releases that are generic and they don't tailor it to the journalist they're writing to. So the other thing you need to do is research that journalist. Back to the targeting, you need to understand what that journalist writes about, what that journalist is interested in, and almost write in their style if you want that particular journalist to write about you. The third thing on PR I'll tell you is, there is a lot of companies out there that will tell you they can get you PR. Please be careful. Now, as much as it might be nice to just pay someone to do this, I have discovered doing the PR yourself, especially if you're a small business, can pay huge dividends. Why? Because you can make a relationship direct with the journalist. And how do you find these journalistic contacts? That's what the PR companies tell you they've got. You can go for a newspaper and find them. You can Google them. You'll find them quite quick. And one big hack I'll give you is Twitter in particular is really good to get hold of journalists. If you start following the journalists that you want to write about you and you start engaging on their posts, I would say that's one of the best ways to start building up a relationship with a journalist. Most people will reply to comments or read a comment that you've made on one of their posts. And weirdly enough, often journalists don't have big followings and they don't actually have a lot of comments. So you can start making a relationship, start commenting on something. If they post something about global warming and you've got a product that's helping reduce global warming, then you will get noticed if you start commenting on a story they've done about it. Start being part of their thinking when it comes to, I need someone to help me write this story. I need someone to give me a quote to make this story better. Start becoming part of that journalist's life. And it starts with just following them on Twitter or replying to one of their comments, engaging on one of the stories they've already written. Even online, things like Daily Mail, the journalists will read the comments on their own story. So engage. Engage is the number one thing I can tell you when it comes to getting PR from journalists. And finally, I have been involved in many conversations where I know brands have not worked with someone because they saw on someone's social media that they posted something obscene or rude or stupid. Remember that you as a business owner will always be the number one PR engine. Whatever you post up, be conscious, be careful. Think about your brand, think about the image that you're projecting. And I can't tell you enough how important this is, because if you do the first few things I've just mentioned, you connect with the press, you know who you're targeting, and you're not lazy, you help them do it. If a journalist sees that you are out of control or inappropriate, they will not risk their job to write about you. So learn to be disciplined. Learn to be the brand. PR starts with one person having respect for you. So make sure you're disciplined. Don't be lazy yourself. Next up, one of my favorite subjects, one of the questions I get asked the most, how to get an investor. Learning how to get an investor can dramatically change the trajectory of your business. Equally though, just before I go into how to get an investor, I want you to think carefully about whether or not you need an investor. Now, I have invested in 78 companies. You can go on my website, simonscribb.com, and look at some of the companies I've invested in. I have seen it all. And sometimes, if you get the wrong investor or get an investor for the wrong reasons, you will have a new boss and your life will become a nightmare. It will be easy at the beginning when you get the money and will get harder over time if you do it wrong. I will try to teach you how to not get it wrong, but equally, please ask yourself, is there another way to make the business work? And I'm going to touch on other ways that you could make it work, even if you don't get an investor, within this How to Get an Investor chat. Now, there are quite a few different ways to get an investor depending on the stage of your business and how much you're trying to raise. If you're trying to raise money in the early days of a business, I would say to you, the more traction you have in your business, the easier it is to get an investor. Now, that does not mean to say if you just have an idea, you can't get an investor. You definitely can. There's just less people that will fund it. So just like the sales stuff I taught you earlier, it's probably better to make sure that you actually know who you're targeting when you're getting an investor. What is the profile of the person you want? So if you're going after someone that perhaps will fund a business that has no traction, it's just an idea, then remember, those people's profile, they probably want quite a lot of equity. They'll probably want some involvement in the business to make sure it works. They probably want some sector relevance, industry relevance to your business so they can add value, because no investor, I don't care who they are, just want to feel like money. Everybody wants to feel like they're bringing some sort of value. In fact, I would argue you shouldn't invest in a business unless you can bring value. You've got to make the value the thing that gives you the edge to make that investment work. Otherwise, you might just invest in the stock market. If you can't bring value, you might as well invest in the stock market. And I don't think you make money from the stock market. Middle class people make money from the stock market. You make money like Warren Buffett makes money. You own a piece of a company you can influence. You can help make sure it's successful. So do your research. But these are the types of profiles that are often the best. Family and friends. Now, I know family and friends can be difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have family and friends with money, and I totally understand that, and I'll come to other methods, but I just want to touch on this first, because family and friends, the reason it's such a good thing to do is because they know you. You don't have to convince someone of your personality, your profile, your dedication. They will know all of that. They'll know the true you most of the time. That can be really powerful in speeding up the process of getting the money you need. Now, of course, we all know it can get messy if you take money off family and friends and you don't pay them back. So tell them the truth. They could lose all their money. That's all you need to do. You need to tell them they could lose all their money. In the wish to get investment, we sometimes go down the road of overselling it, and that's totally normal. But please be careful with this, especially with family and friends. If you tell them, you invest in my business, it could all go wrong, you can lose everything, then after that, it's up to them. But you make it clear. Don't oversell it that it's a guaranteed win. It cannot be a guaranteed win. Nothing ever is unless you've watched all of this video, of course, there's a high chance, but you know what I mean. Please, please be careful. But I have seen it work, and often family and friends can also help you, which in the early days of any business, if that's the stage you're at, then getting help is probably more valuable than money. But I've seen it work, so do give it serious consideration. And of course, friend of a friend can also be the way to raise money. If you don't have someone in your family that's rich, maybe you've got a friend who has a family that's rich. Learn to leverage the network, because your friend recommending you to someone who's rich will be powerful, and doesn't mean it'll also save you time. In the VC world, which I'll talk about in a minute, getting a recommendation is the only way to get investment. They don't take applications online, despite what their websites say. I've seen it. They don't. They take it from recommendation. So start really networking. The second thing I'll say, and I've never seen anyone else talk about this when it comes to getting an investor, and that is consider the people you want to work with you in your company as potential investors. So sometimes when you're profiling the people you want in your business, you will look at it and say, right, well, I can't afford the best, so I'll get this person, right? Which is fine, I understand that. But the smart people think differently. The smart people think, who are the best? And let's say I'm building right now a competitor to LinkedIn, helpbank.com. So I think, who's number 2 at LinkedIn? I want them to come and join me. They're never going to be number 1 at LinkedIn, not for a long time, but maybe they want the chance to build their own LinkedIn and come and join me. Now, the great thing about the number 2 at LinkedIn, definitely got some money in the bank, right? Some money to invest in the business. So I can, and I've done this many times, so this isn't just a theory, but look at your team. Look at your team members as potential investors. In the platform I'm running today, helpbank.com, the people that are involved in this business have invested in this business. Callum, who's behind the camera right now, has put his own money into this business, and he's got equity because of it, and he's taken a lower salary initially. So there's all sorts of benefits to actually doing it this way. You can get your cost down, you can get the best in class involved in the business, and you can bring money in to help make the company work. And it's much better to have money from people that are actually working in the business than people externally who are asking you for a report of when they're going to get their money back. The third thing you can do, and of course this is more traditional, but it is very complex, so I'll try to explain how to go about getting this type of person in your business, but it's an angel investor. Now, you might have heard the term many times. You've probably watched rubbish shows like Dragon's Den and thought that getting an investor is the dragon or the angel sits there with all the money and you are desperately trying to get that money off them by making them see your vision. That is the wrong way to get an angel investor. The best way to get an angel investor on board, once you've identified them and done the research to find out who they are, you've been very clear about what you're going to give them if they invest. All of that is common sense, right? I don't need to teach you that right now. Of course, you need to know how much you're going to give them and why. And I'll get into equity in a little bit later in the video, so you can try to work that bit out. But once you've established who you want as an investor and what you're willing to give them, the way to get an investor is completely the opposite to what you think. You think getting an investor is, hi, I've got a business, this is this business, would you like to invest? No. The best way to get an angel investor is not ask for money. The best way to get an angel investor is ask for help. Because you've identified the right investor, they want to feel value. If they can't bring value, they don't want to invest. And often, if you do it right, it's not like Dragon's Den. I've invested in 78 businesses. I always feel honored and lucky when I get to invest in a successful business. They do not treat me like a dragon. They do not treat me with awe. They treat me with respect. But they also identify why they've approached me, how I can bring value, and make me feel special. And ultimately, I then feel lucky to be involved in that business if they do that right. If you ask me for advice, you're more likely to get money out of me than you straight up ask me for money. Now, I'm not saying don't build ask into the process. Of course, when you do a pitch to an angel investor, you should definitely put in there you're looking for money. But the best way to put it is we're looking for money from the right people. Make it a little harder for people to get involved in your business. That's how you get an angel investor. You create FOMO, right? FOMO, you probably heard it, but in case you haven't, it's probably one of the most powerful things. Fear of missing out. You make people understand, and you do it sincerely, that if they don't invest, they're missing out. That is the key to getting an angel investor. Now, of course, treat an angel investor with respect. If you can, prepare a correct and appropriate amount of equity they're going to get, make it clear why, explain your long-term investment plans, so how they're going to dilute, because angel investors often get diluted. So if you're offering them 5%, it might sound like a lot, but if you get another investor and another investor as things go down the line, that person could end up with 1% of the company or 0.5% of the company. And remember, most angel investors will be involved in the business. So make sure you actually need them to help you. Don't just pretend that they need you need them. Because once you get them on board as an investor, it will go pear-shaped. So it's not just about convincing the person to get on board. It's also convincing yourself that they're the right person to have with you on this journey in the long term. Make sure you do that.